Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's Mike here at Game From Scratch, and today we have one for the ages. In that corner we have the Unity game engine, and in that corner we have the Unreal game engine. And now, fight! Actually, what we're going to look at today is not which game engine is better. If anyone tells you that X is better than Y without a lot of qualifiers, just stop listening to that person. Both game engines are perfectly good. They're good at certain things, and some are better in some areas than in other areas. So if you're trying to decide between the Unity game engine and the Unreal game engine, hopefully this video or the article I've linked from this video will help you make that decision. Now, of course, there are other game engines out there. One of the ones many on my channel are going to be familiar with is the Godot game engine. I've actually already done a video on the Godot game engine on why you would choose it or not choose it compared to the likes of Unity or Unreal Engine. So I ain't going down that road with this video. There's also a couple of other game engines out there in the same sort of space, things like CryEngine and Lumberyard that were sort of from a common source. Maybe I'll do a video comparing those two together, but for this one, I'm going to stick to the two most popular large game engines out there, Unreal and Unity. So we'll start off with here is a look at kind of a brief history. We're going to break down what it's like from a programmer's perspective, some of the strengths and weaknesses of each game engine, and we'll go from there. Hopefully by the end of it, you'll have an idea of which engine is right for you. So let's start things off with the Unity game engine. Now, the Unity game engine has been around for quite a while, probably longer than a lot of you realize, in that it started life back in 2005. Now, the reason why almost nobody knows about it from the beginning is it was a Mac-only product, which is very strange because this was also a C# game engine, one of the very first major game engines out there, powered by C#, and it was on a Macintosh platform. Very strange choice back in the day, but hey. Then in 2007, they moved it over to the Windows platform. That was about 2.5, I think. 2.5 to 3.0 version. And at the same time, there was a big thing that happened in the industry. That is that the Apple App Store launched, and the rise of gaming on mobile phones and the rise of the Unity game engine came perfectly timed together, and they both grew up together. Designed from the very beginning to make game development more approachable, opening up to a wider audience, and I think few can argue that they succeeded in that regard. Along the way, there's also launched a highly successful advertising platform and created the single biggest developer marketplace of any engine out there. Since they continue to add features and, more importantly, target platforms to the point that Unity can pretty much target any platform ever released other than maybe like the Amiga. So you can run it on every VR device that you could consider, every console you could consider, every platform you can consider probably has a Unity runtime. Now, in recent years, they've kind of gone from being a hobbyist-focused engine to try and become more of a professional engine, and they're trying to do this kind of in place. They're doing an inline upgrade of the Unity game engine by replacing underlying systems with the new DOTS, or data-oriented technology stack, and rendering pipelines, the programmable rendering pipelines, the UWP, Universal Render Pipeline, also the URP, the Universal Render Pipeline, and the HDRP, the High Definition Render Pipeline, are the two big focuses to try and bring Unity up to graphical parity with Unreal Engine. Now, there are some growing pains involved in that, and we will get back to that in the future of this video. Now, if you're interested in learning a bit more about the Unity game engine, I've linked an article. It's got a great history. It's someone's universally final on the history of Unity, and there's some great information to be gleaned there, by the way. All right, so now we're going to switch over to the Unreal Engine. The history of Unreal is a bit more contemporary. Back in 98, Unreal was released. Unreal started life as a video game. It was the first real competitor to the likes of, was it competing with Quake or was it competing with Doom? Anyways, it was one of the first real competitors in the 3D gaming space. And versions of Unreal grew up with it. Now, from the very, very beginning, back in the days, id Tech licensed out their technology, and Unreal was sort of developed as a licensed technology. Whereas id Tech was basically, oh yeah, you can make games using our technology as well. Unreal was actually more, or Unreal Engine was more of a product. Now, back then, there were other licenses or game engine technologies, things like NetImmerse, which is ultimately what is powering, or a predecessor, is what powers Bethesda's games these days. Renderware, which was bought by Electronic Arts. LithTech, which was behind Shogo and No One Lives Forever, and so on. And of course, there was id Tech back in the day. So that is kind of where Unreal Engine came about. Epic Games, kept making their own games as well, but they productized their engine and sold it to more and more people. Another thing to keep in mind, licensing game engines back in those days had 6 to 7 figure licensing costs. So if you wanted to license Unreal Engine or id Tech, you were paying $500,000, $1 million, and on. So this was a very lucrative industry back in the day. At this point, Epic became a game and a game technology company, a structure that continues to this day. So they still make games like Fortnite using their technology, and they use it to dog food the development of their technology. But they're probably the biggest game licensor to the AAA space that's out there. And if you look at games that were made with the various versions of Unreal Engine over time, it's a who's who of gaming greats. Titles such as Unreal Tournament, Deus Ex, BioShock, the various different versions, Splinter Cell, the Batman Arkham games, Borderlands series, Gears of War, Mass Effect, Mortal Kombat, PUBG, Fortnite, and of course Goat Simulator. So it has been used to make so many major titles, which is one of the biggest selling points for Unreal Engine. Among big budget games not built with in-house technology, so if you've got a multi-million-dollar budget for your game, Unreal Engine has been the king of the A to AAA space for as long as that space has existed. You'll notice, however, mobile titles are a little lacking. Until Infinity Blade, Unreal was relatively unknown in the mobile space, and it's improved over time. The massive success of Fortnite really shows their focus on getting the mobile support in place. I started playing with an indie version with Unreal Engine 3. Back then, Unreal Engine used to be called UDK. And then with the release of Unreal Engine 4, they really changed it. They started off basically with a $20 monthly subscription and then associated costs involved. We'll get into the cost details in a few more seconds. But that part was a huge change. With the release of Unreal Engine 4, they tried to make their tools much more usable to the masses, much more approachable, so you didn't need an entire studio to work with it. You didn't need a build engineer to get things working and so on. And they also switched to a subscription-based royalty structure, a small subscription and a royalty structure, and then eventually they got rid of that $20 a month subscription completely and went with straight-up royalties. Again, we'll get into the costs in just a few minutes. So that's a brief history and kind of a background to where each game engine came from. Now let's look at things from a programmer's perspective. Each game engine takes a very different approach to how developers, specifically coders, work with each engine. One major difference is Unreal Engine has its source code available on GitHub. It's not technically open source. You can't just grab that code and do whatever you want with it. You're still under their closed source licenses, but you can build Unreal Engine from scratch. You want to make a change to Unreal Engine, you can. Now, there are people out there that argue that nobody actually does this, and that is a lie. Look at the release notes for Unreal Engine on any given month, and you will see that hundreds of fixes are being contributed from the community. So you can change the small aspects of the engine yourself and the ability to build the entire thing from scratch. Now, from the Unity side of things, it's closed source. Now, there are bits of it that are being more open source from a reference point of view, and then they're moving to a more package-based structure. We'll get to that in the future, but those packages are more and more commonly open source. But Unity itself is closed source, and if you want to have access to that source code, you have to get a custom license, rumored to be in the 6 digits plus range to do so. So you're not going to be doing that as a small indie studio anytime soon. In terms of the actual gameplay programming, there are 2 major ways to program in Unreal Engine: C++ and Blueprints. Now, Unreal Engine's approach is to make C++ more like a scripting language. It uses a technology called Live++, which allows you to do no recompile builds to your gameplay logic. So you can do your gameplay logic using the C++ scripting language. But if you don't really want to go that approach, there's Blueprints. Now, Blueprints is a visual graph-based programming system, and in my humble opinion, it's probably the best visual programming option that out there today. It's also being capable of being compiled down to C++ code. So it used to be, when it was first released, when Unreal Engine 4 was first released, you paid like a 10-to-1 performance cost to have Blueprints. So your Blueprint code would run at about a tenth of the speed of dedicated C++ code. Well-written C++ code, that is. Now, crappily written C++ code can run incredibly slow, but that has come way down. So now you might be paying maybe like a 50% penalty or even less if you're working with Blueprints. So the performance has definitely improved in that side of things. Now, build times in Unreal Engine, oh my God. But we'll get back to that when we get to the strengths and weaknesses sides of each engine. Now, on the Unity side of things, Unity used to have a pretty diverse selection of languages. It's built on top of the Mono .NET runtime. So you used to have C#, but on top of that, they also had Boo, which was like Python, and Unity script, which was like Java or ECMA script. In recent years, though, they've dumped everything. So if you want to program in the Unity game engine, you're basically using the C# programming language. Now, with the move to DOTS, or the data-oriented technology stack, that's a combination of things like entity component systems, the job system, burst compiler, and all this other jargon. They're also creating a new visual programming language, but it is very, very young at this point in time. Now, you will find that build times in Unity are literal fractions of the build times that are required in Unreal Engine. That's a huge difference between the two. The amount of time it takes to run C++ code versus C# code is profound. Let's be honest there. So both game engines also have app stores or game dev marketplace that offer additional ways that gameplay can be made available by third parties. So if you look at either app store, they might have their own custom programming languages for extending it. So you don't necessarily have to work with C#, C++, or Blueprints if you use a third-party tool. But I'm not including the marketplace stuff in this rundown, although I do want you to be aware that it exists out there. All right, so now let's get into the features area. And to be honest, this is going to sound like a bit of a cop-out because, quite frankly, it doesn't matter that much anymore. The feature parity between these things, these game engines have added so bloody many features over time that they've probably got the feature you need. Unless you're doing something really, really niche, they have tons of tooling, features, and stuff all out of the box. And they're both loaded. They're both kind of playing keep up with each other, but at this point in time, the tool, you can almost safely expect that the game engine supports what you want in some way, shape, or form. Now, it may not do it the way you want it to, but there is a tool for it out there. So they've got animation tools, profilers, content creation, importing tools, terrain creation tools, physics, audio, virtual reality, cutscene controls, version control integration, and so on. Chances are Unreal Entity and Unity are the first and second most feature-rich game engines out there. Now, which one is the richest? I don't know, but it's to the point where it doesn't really matter that much. Now, there are two areas where Unity shines over Unreal Engine, though. One is 2D, and the other one is the web. Now, when things started out, the Unreal Game Engine was pushing something called Paper 2D, which was their 2D game framework, and they dumped that. So dedicated 2D development in Unreal Engine, it's not really a thing. Now, there are 2D games out there created using Unreal Engine, but the developers of those games did a whole lot of work themselves, whereas you will find more 2D focused game features in the Unity game engine. Now, the other area where Unity shines, again, is the web. The last release, Unreal actually spun their HTML5 platform off into a community project. I don't know anybody that's really building HTML5 games using Unreal Engine, so maybe that's not really a big deal. But if you're going to build a HTML5 game and you're choosing between these two engines, I think Unity just kind of wins that contest hands down. Now, an area where Unreal seems to have an edge, and this one is where we kind of get into a little bit more controversial area, is visual quality. Right out of the box, you get better looking graphics with Unreal Engine. I think the majority of people will agree with that. Now, Unity is trying to close the gap with the move to DOTS and the move to a programmable pipeline with their high-def render pipeline, and the graphical quality of Unity are getting a whole lot better. Now, can we use HDRP in this day and age? We're close, but I don't know if we're necessarily there yet. Now, in terms of platform supported, this area kind of gets a little insane because you support iOS, Android, Windows, Linux, Mac OS, WebGL, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo platforms, the Oculus Rift, the HTC Vive, Steam platforms. Pretty much, if it's a major platform, they both support it. Also comes down to things like virtual reality and augmented reality. They both support it. Now, one thing to keep aware of, if you want to support Microsoft's platform, Sony's platform, or Nintendo's platforms, you still need to have a developer agreement in place with the console manufacturer before you can use it. So just because these game engines can make binaries or executables for console platforms, you still need to have your own developer kit. So something to be aware of in both regards. So they all say they support all these platforms, and they do, but you do need to also have the support of the hardware manufacturer. Just something to be aware of right there. All right, so next up we're going to get into community. Now, community is actually pretty important to overall for game engines. Both Unity and Unreal, they have vibrant communities alongside all the books, tutorials, and materials that come with those large communities. That said, Unity's community is probably 3 to 4 times more published books out there, bigger forums and tutorials and so on. When it comes to, if you go to YouTube and you search for Unity tutorials, you'll probably find several times more than you will for Unreal. Now, if you come and you look at the quality of the stuff that Epic's put out there, though, they have exceptionally good learning materials. So this is an area where they're both quite important, and if you have a technical question and go to the forums, there is a big enough community that you can probably get an answer. So another aspect of communities is the developer marketplace. I've touched on this briefly before. The Unity asset store pretty much pioneered the concept. They were the first ones to kind of offer this marketplace where Unity developers can sell models and not blueprints, but add-ons, extensions, and logic and stuff like that. And it is a huge, massive resource of free and commercial stuff. Unreal has actually followed suit, but theirs is a fraction of the size of the Unity one. So I guarantee you more people are making money in the Unity marketplace, and there's just more available in the Unity marketplace. But the quality, well, that could be a different argument. Now, at the same time, Unreal Engine do monthly giveaways. So at the beginning of every month, they give away 5 assets plus a couple more free forever. So it could be that if you're using Unreal Engine, there is less need for a marketplace. And I think it's also fair to say, out of the box, Unreal Engine is more complete than Unity is. So with Unity, you are more likely to need some kind of an extension from the marketplace, whereas you will find that Unreal Engine is a bit more of a complete package out of the box with less need for a marketplace. So while its marketplace is much, much, much smaller, the need for it is probably a little bit lower. Now, one of those areas, especially when you're playing top trunks with game engines, where you really kind of want to look at things is where the games come down. So the titles that have been shipped using a game engine of one versus the other. And this is an area where you can really see their focus comes in. Basically, Unity started life as an indie-focused game engine that grew in scope. And then Unreal Engine started life as a commercial AAA game engine that was then Indiaified. So you see that represented in some of the notable titles. So from the Unreal side of things, some of the published games you've definitely heard of is we've got things like Fortnite. We've got the Mortal Kombat series, which, by the way, is still actually using Unreal Engine 3, at least a derived version of it where they've massively modified their source code. And then we got titles like Ace Combat 7, Ark Survival Evolved, Batman series, Gears of War series, Kingdom Hearts 3, PUBG, Sea of Thieves, Street Fighter 5, Borderlands 3, and then the one kind of exception here for the 2D games, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, was created using the Unity game engine. So you can, using the Unreal game engine. So you can definitely create 2D games using Unreal. It's just you're going to have to do more work. Now, if we flip over and look at some of the most notable titles on the Unity side of things, we've got titles like Hearthstone, Cuphead, Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2, Firewatch, all the various different Shadowrun games, and Battletech. We got Ori and the Blind Forest, Kerbal Space Program, Recore, and City Skyline. There are probably an order of magnitude more Unity titles than Unreal Engine titles, but in terms of like AAA or huge budget games, Unreal kind of washes the floor with Unity. At the end of the day, when it comes down to that A to indie to A space, you can see an argument for either engine, but you can definitely see kind of a focus for the types of games that are published using each engine. All right, so that is some of the titles that are definitely out there. Now let's take a look at the price between the two game engines. They take a different approach towards monetization. Each has their advantage and disadvantage, and there's like a break-even point depending on the type of game you are developing. We'll start with Unreal Engine. It's kind of the most straightforward. Unreal works off a straight royalty scheme after you've made a certain amount of income. UE4 is free to use with a 5% royalty on gross product revenue after $3,000 per game per quarter from a commercial product. So after you make $3,000 on a 3-month basis, you owe them 5% on gross revenue, not profit, revenue thereafter. So if your game makes $100,000, or say, we'll keep the math easy, makes $103,000, you owe Unreal Engine $5,000. Now, one of those things is if you were actually thinking your game is going to make a monstrous amount of money. So if you're like, say, NetherRealms and you want a license for that, you can negotiate a flat rate up front with Epic. But that, again, if you don't have a lawyer, you're not even thinking about that area, by the way. Now we get back to the Unity side of things. Unity sells their software more like traditional subscription models to software. Multiple plans geared towards the developer's income. Unity just had a price increase on January the 1st of 2020. They also got rid of annual payment pricing at that point in time. So there's 3 different tiers for Unity developers. There is the personal or free tier. So if you make less than $100,000 per year, you don't have to pay anything. You can use the free tier. It's almost feature complete. There are some features missing, like a dark skin and a couple of other tools, but for the most part, it is the same Unity everyone else is using. And as long as you're making less than 100 grand a year, it's completely free to use. Next up, we have the Plus tier. This is for $40 a month. Tier gets you additional features like access to their learning premium platform, some analytics, cloud hosting, and so on. The biggest difference here is that the revenue limitation goes up to $200,000 a year. So if you're making more than $100,000 but less than $200,000, you can get the Plus tier at $40 a month per user, by the way. And then we get to the professional tier at $150 per month per developer. It has a number of additional features, but nothing really kind of major that you saw there. Of course, you got the dark skin on both of those, all this different analytics stuff. But the biggest thing there on the professional level is that you have no revenue limitations at that point in time. If you make $100 billion, you still just pay $150 per developer per month. Now, you also can't mix, by the way. So you can't have some developers on the Plus tier and some on the Pro tier. You've got all the people in your studio, all your artists, all your developers, and so on, paying $150 a month. Now, which one makes the most sense to you really comes down to your organization. But those are the 2 pricing structures we've got there. Now, one last thing to talk about with Unity, you do not have source code licenses, but if you are willing to pay them enough money, there are source code licenses available directly from Unity, but the costs of that are not made public. Okay, so that is kind of a general rundown. Let's go through some of the pros and cons. I kind of nailed these as I was going through, but let's just do a quick rundown. Now, this is just my list, and this is the things I could think of. So there could be bigger things, there could be things that you don't necessarily see as a pro, and things that you don't necessarily see as a con. But these are the ones that I would highlight at this point in time. And so Unity, pros we've got. Support for every major platform. That's definitely a nice thing. If there's a platform out there, Unity runs on it. There's a massive community and support network. We already mentioned this earlier on, but you've got things like books and tutorials and learning materials. And as a direct result, and we'll do this as the next pro, this is the largest developer market by far. So if you're looking for someone with Unity game engine experience, they will be exceptionally easy to find. It will be easier to find a Unity developer than it will be to find an Unreal Engine developer or a CryEngine developer or a Godot developer or whatever. It's the biggest community out there, and that does make hiring easier. They also offer certification and training programs that kind of guarantee a baseline of experience among potential candidates, which I think they're unique in offering that feature as well. Another area where Unity really shines is much better support for 2D game development compared to Unreal Engine. You've got things like tile map support and dedicated 2D physics. A dedicated 2D renderer was just added with the universal render pipeline. And they're adding new tools to the 2D side of things every day, whereas on the Unreal Engine side, they had Paper 2D and they just kind of stopped. Another area where Unity really shines is the engine is much more genre agnostic. So you can see where it's being used to make a lot of strategy games and role-playing games and so on. It's more of a general purpose game engine with kind of not a thought towards the type of games that are developed with it. And that's kind of illustrated with the broad variety of games that we were seeing made, from mobile titles to card games to first-person shooters and, third-person role-playing titles. It is a more adaptable game engine out of the box for a variety of different genres. That's not to say you can't pull the same things off using Unreal Engine, but it's got more of a focus. We'll get back to that in a second. Faster development cycle. Build times are so much quicker on Unity than they are on Unreal Engine. Also, I find, and this one's kind of narrowing every day, asset importing is also faster from Unity than it is Unreal. They're also redoing their file system with like the most recent release, 2019.3, has the beginnings of a new importing system that should make all of that even faster. Another one, and this one's kind of not really spoken of that much, is they have their own ad network. Unity Ads is huge. It's a great way to make money off of certain kinds of titles, and they run it completely. So if you want to monetize your Unity game out of the box, that is a pretty nice feature they've got going on there. This next one, kind of a pro, kind of a con, is they have an open and quick iteration on development. So they're very transparent with regular alpha and beta releases. So at any particular time, you have a a beta version, an alpha version, months down the road. So you got an idea of where Unity is going at all times. Now, with the release of 2019.3, they actually suggested that they're going to be slowing this down a little bit, having less releases per year. But that was one of the strengths they've got. And then another strength they got, which is also a weakness, is they've really redesigned the engine to be much more modular in scope. So now things like physics and the rendering and input systems and so on are available as add-ons that you can basically just, you go into the package manager, add a package in, and you get that new functionality. So that package can continue to be developed independently of the rest of the engine. All right, so that is the pros as I see them. And then, of course, there's the C#, which you can look at as a pro or you can look at that as a con. Now let's go back to the con side of things. So out of the box, the visuals are inferior to Unreal Engine. You just get better looking results out of Unreal Engine. I think the majority of people would agree with that. Some people would obviously disagree, but I think the majority was on my side on that argument. And another area that really stands up, and you hear people talk about this with Unity-based games, is there's performance issues. Now, that comes down to the individual developer, but there have been just enough titles that have shipped that have had, I don't know, it almost feels like garbage collection issues where the whole game just kind of grinds to a halt. If you've played Battletech, you know what I mean. It gets slower and slower and slower as the game goes on. It's a classic memory leak scenario. Now, is it down to the developers? It's hard to say because this is so consistent across Unity titles that there just seems to be something there, a built-in performance issue that you'll run into. I even find this with Call of Duty Mobile, which is a Unity title. I just find it just sort of freezes up every once in a while. Ditto with Elder Scrolls Blades. It just sort of freezes up periodically and then goes right back to normal. So performance issues with Unity have been a persistent plaguing problem. They might come down to the end developer, but I've seen them in enough high-profile titles that I'm going to definitely put this as a con. Again, another major con with Unity is there's no ability to build from source code. Now, if you're not the type that would ever go in and bug fix your own engine, you don't give a damn about this. But if you're making a major investment in the game engine, there is a lot of peace of mind knowing that you can go in and remove a performance problem or fix a bug or maybe fix one of those performance issues I just talked about a second ago. So the lack of source code is definitely a negative when it comes to Unity for many people anyways. And the next one is a little bit more arbitrary, but Unity doesn't have a AAA title yet. Now they're getting bigger and higher profile, but they don't have like an Elder Scrolls or Mortal Kombat or Gears of War or like this major AAA style title that you can say and point to and say, that was created using Unity. I think we'll get one soon, but that is definitely one of the cons for Unity. Now, of course, a lot of you guys are not going to be creating a AAA title, so that really doesn't matter to the majority of people. And, you got to scope your game according to what you're actually creating and the problems you actually need. But one of the perceived problems with Unity is the lack of AAA titles behind it. Next up, we've got the scripting options. So basically, the visual scripting is literally just starting. We'll see where that goes, but compared to blueprints, the visual scripting in Unity is garbage. Now, again, it literally just started, so it'll be interesting to see where they go with that. We've got some visual scripting in the forms of shader development, and it's got nice tools that they're building upon, so this is an area where I expect it to improve. But if you want to take more of a visual approach to your game development, it's not the right engine for you right now. Now, we went back to the one I said before as a pro, is modular redesigns, where things are broken down into different packages. This is also a con, and in my opinion, actually, this is the biggest con. Whenever I go to work with Unity these days, since about 2019.1 or the end of 2018, there's package hell. You just have so much trouble getting the damn thing to run because you need to have a specific version of the render pipeline, a specific version of the burst compiler, a specific version of the physics engine, a specific version of the Unity hub, of Unity itself, and these it's making running code a hell of a lot harder than it used to be. So the modular approach is a double-edged sword. It allows you to update faster, but it creates more interdependencies and makes your game engine more fragile as a result. And this is kind of another kind of problem here. So we've got this, what they've done with Unity is that they could have basically stopped with Unity development and then created the next version, just sort of spun things off or they could do an upgrade in place. And they went with the upgrade in place approach, which, this is kind of the opposite of what Unreal Engine did. When Unreal Engine went from Unreal Engine 3 to Unreal Engine 4, they basically did a complete tool rewrite. Unity kind of want to avoid that, so they're trying to do an upgrade in place. This is why we've got things like the dots technology, the updated UI, and all that stuff kind of being done in open view. Now, none of that technology is really usable in a game now, and it's going to take a while to become mature enough to be reliable. But the alternative is we would have had to wait 3 to 4 years and then basically start your game from scratch on the new technology. Did they take the right approach with just doing the upgrade in place? It's hard to say, but just do know you're going to have some pain points while that upgrade is happening. And then we go into dots. Now, dots, like we've talked about this a couple times, a data-oriented technology stack. It's a collection of technologies, things like the entity component system, the burst compiler, the job system, a stripped-down version of C# for high performance. I'm missing something else, but it's a collection of these technologies, and this is the future of fast, parallel, scalable code in the world of Unity. This is going to replace the monolithic game object / mono behavior workflow you've got right now, and I will tell you in all honesty, it's 10 times harder to learn than mono behavior game objects. A lot of people are not going to like dots. It's just it's not an intuitive and quick and easy way to learn, and your knowledge doesn't transfer nicely. Now, the nice thing is, I think they realized that, and they've started providing tools for doing automatic conversion from game objects over to the new dot system. So that should make it an easier process for other people to learn. But right now, writing ECS code or entity-based code that's compatible with their job system and so on, it's a hell of a learning curve, and it's not well documented right now. And then finally, you've got a choice between C#, C#, C#. So what do you want to use? If it's C#, you're good to go. If it's something else, you either need to go to the marketplace or you are out of luck. It kind of sucks that they killed off their JavaScript and Boo versions over time, and they're down to a single language option out there. All right, so that is kind of the pros and cons of Unity. We're going to get into Unreal now. Now, Unreal is going to have a little bit quicker in some ways because some of these are like parallel to Unity, and some of these are contrasted off Unity, and we've already covered them. All right, so here we're going to go with the pros. Again, support for every major platform. If a new VR headset or device comes out or console is released, Unity and Unreal Engine get support for it almost right away. There are more platforms supported on the Unity side of things, but functionally, they both support just about everything you would expect. Source code, except for Linux. I think Linux people in the Unity world are not, in the Unreal Engine world, not too happy. Okay, so next up we've got source code availability. This one is huge. Again, you can build Unreal Engine yourself from code. You don't need to use their launcher. You can literally pull it out from GitHub and build it yourself. It can take you a while, but you can do it. This also means that you can fix it, and this also means that you can benefit from the community's fixes. And that actually does happen. When you see the release notes for a new version, there are tons of bug fixes and improvements submitted by the community, and that is the power of open source. That is definitely one of the huge pluses that Unreal Engine has. And then we get into graphics. Yeah. Unreal Engine has all of the graphics, all of them, even that teapot over there. If you want to make something look pretty, it's a lot easier in Unreal Engine. There is kind of an Unreal Engine look, I think you could argue, but that's because people are lazy and don't change for the default shaders and light sources and so on. But I think, once again, the majority of people would say that Unreal Engine has the edge from a graphical perspective, and I ain't gonna lie, I agree with that. It also, in my opinion, has the better editor, less legacy cruft. Now, of course, that one comes down to a matter of personal opinion, but it kind of, you can really look at it this way. The technology behind Unreal Engine 4 is about 6 or 7 years newer than under the Unity game engine. Now, Unity is trying to update their graphics, their UI and experience, inline. So we just got HDPI support and new fonts and new buttons and so on in the Unity game engine. But Unreal is frankly just newer, and it shows in their UI. I like their UI better, but again, that could obviously come down to a matter of performance. I also find, preference. But on the topic of performance, Unreal Engine has excellent performance out of the box. You get great, it does a good job on scene culling. You throw a lot of polygons at it. It just handles them. I'm not seeing those game-killing slowdowns I see in a lot of Unity titles. And, I don't traditionally think of Unreal Engine titles and think, ooh, bad performance. Now, there are a couple of games made using Unreal Engine that have terrible performance. You're going to get that no matter what game engine you're looking at. But out of the box, it just seems to be easier to get good performance out of Unreal Engine than it does out of Unity. Or at least you're not going to hit bottlenecks as fast using Unreal Engine as you would with Unity. Now, next up, it is exceptionally battle tested. So literally hundreds of professional titles have been shipped using Unreal Engine in a broad swath of genres and styles. So we've got things from, 60 hertz fighting games like Mortal Kombat. Then you've got, third-person cover shooters like Gears of War. Then you've got games like Bloodstained. So there are a ton of titles out there that were built with Unreal Engine. And you can see from some of these absolutely massive AAA titles that Unreal Engine can probably do what you think you need from it. So that battle tested part, the fact that those AAA titles do exist there's a peace of mind there. So even if you're not creating a AAA title yourself, you at least can look at it and go, well, it's capable of this. Another kind of strength of Unreal Engine is they give away free assets at the beginning of every month. Actually, Unreal Engine just likes giving away stuff. You can probably just get money from them. They're really generous in giving away stuff. And that's definitely a nice thing with working with Unreal Engine. And then finally, and this one is a decisive point, a lot of people do not like the Epic Game Store. I do not have an opinion on it. I'm fine with it. But if you're a developer, the Epic Game Store is made for you. It's got great royalties, great rates. You pay 12% instead of 30%, what you would with Steam. And then the key thing here is if you develop your game using Unreal Engine and you publish it on the Epic Game Store, that 5% royalty we were talking about earlier for Unreal Engine, gone. And that is a huge savings. So if you're publishing on, say, Steam and on Epic Game Store, on Epic Game Store, you're paying only a 7% royalty versus a 30% royalty. It's a huge, huge boon there if you like the Epic Game Store. All right, so now let's get into the cons. On the con side of things, the first one is very straightforward. 2D has basically been abandoned. It's that you want to develop a 2D game, you're rolling it yourself. Just nature of the beast here. Design of the engine is very focused towards third and first person titles. You can tell that this was developed to create a shooter. It's kind of showing in their actor and pawn setup and game modes and all that. It feels very much like this is designed to make shooters, first and third person perspective games. And when you start making a title outside of that, which you obviously can do, but you're going to fight with the design of the engine a little bit more. But not a huge deal on the grand scheme of things, but one of those things to definitely be aware of. Another question mark area is the future commitment to the HTML5 platforms. If you don't care about building for web, you don't care about this con, but they recently spun that off into a community supported project, and I think development assets are gone from that. So if you're going to develop your game and your primary platform is web platforms, Unreal Engine is not the right tool for you. Now, probably the people that are working with Unreal Engine on a daily basis, their biggest complaint, it's got to be build times. Oh my God, build times. So building your game in Unreal Engine probably will take 4 or 5 times what it would take to create the equivalent thing in Unity. And this is one of those things you're going to run into on a daily basis. Now, you can get around it. You can get like Incredibuild servers up and going. If you've got a big enough environment, you can create build servers to make this less painful. Just do be aware, if you're building a game using Unreal Engine, it's going to take a while. And if you're building an Android game using Unreal Engine, just kiss your kin goodbye, because you're probably never going to see them again. It's painful. And at the same time, asset importing is also excruciatingly slow. Now, there's a lot that happens when you import 3D models and stuff into a scene. It's just the process in Unreal. Yeah, hopefully you like making tea or something, you can kill the time, because you're going to have a lot of spare time in that regard. Now, another negative here is the marketplace. Now, again, there's the plus there. They give away a lot for free, but they almost have to, because the marketplace is like minuscule compared to the Unity marketplace. So if you're looking for models and code and so on, you're not going to find nearly as many assets. Also, if you want to sell assets, you're going to have a much smaller audience to sell to. And then this one, the next one, this one was just to be consistent. There's no C# support, at least out of the box. A lot of people really like C#. I really like C#, and I'm kind of sad that it's not there. I would rather do gameplay logic coding in C# than C++ any day of the week. Now, I do like blueprints though, so it's not a huge deal for me, but definitely the lack of C# support is one of those things that is going to turn some people off, especially because C# is quickly turning into like the lingua franca of game development. So it's turning into one of those things that you want from your developer base, and it's easy to find C# developers as a result. And then finally, and this is no means tiny, but the Unreal Engine community, the developer community is smaller. So hiring developers and finding mentors or support and so on, it's harder in the Unreal Engine side of things than it is from the Unity side of things. Now, it'd be interesting though if you compare technical expert level. So you can find a ton of beginner to intermediate level Unity developers, but finding pros, I don't know that there's really an edge for one versus the other. But on the whole, the developer community for Unreal Engine is smaller than Unity Engine. Just one of those things to be aware of. All right, so that is it. That is trying to be as unbiased as possible. So definitely each game engine has its strength. It has its weakness. They came into the world from different directions. So Unity started life as a power the everyman kind of tool for making, you know, personal sized games. And then it kind of grew up there. It grew up with the explosion of iPad games or iOS games. It grew up with Android's explosion of games, and it kind of moved more and more into the indie space. And then we started seeing large indie A-style games, and we're moving towards a AAA approach. Whereas Unreal Engine took things from the exact opposite side of the approach. They started with basically a game engine for their AAA game, and then sold it to other AAA game providers. And then since they've tried to expand to support a bigger and bigger marketplace to appeal more and more to the indie market. So then they started making easier to use tools, more approachable, things like blueprints, you know, better importation tools, better documentation, and that kind of stuff. So now these two are kind of meeting in the middle. And that's why you can't just say this is better than that, because in some ways that Unreal is better than Unity, in some ways Unity is better than Unreal, and in a lot of cases, which one is better is going to really come down to what you are looking at from an engine. So that is where we're at. Hopefully I helped some of you. And the nice thing here is they are both exceptionally well funded. Both are adding features on an almost daily basis. They're playing tit for tat. So if one adds a feature, the other one generally adds a feature as well. So you can expect either decision to be a perfectly good one. So if you choose Unreal, and Unreal is working out for you, Unreal is going to be around for the next 5 years, guaranteed. You pick Unity, Unity is going to be around for the next 5 years, pretty much guaranteed. So there's not a lot of risk in choosing either. Hopefully, you know, I can help you pick one way or the other. And if neither of these appeal to you, hey, I got a ton of stuff on my channel for you to check out. So look for the other engines there as well. There are literally hundreds of them. We can go through those as well at a later date. All right, that's it. That is Unreal versus Unity. Hopefully you got some use out of that, and I'll talk to you all later. Goodbye.